Coogs house. Houston holds on an offensive shootout to win the Texas Bowl and get to 10 wins in the season, capping a stellar season for Willie Fritz.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, today a podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, I don't care. Houston just won the Texas Bowl, and I'm too excited about it to really care what you hate or don't hate. Louisiana has got to start with an L, so that's what the team tweeted out. Today's show is brought to you by Rougiette, which feels like a cruel joke we'll probably make a few times throughout the episode, but if you need to be ready in 15 minutes or up to 36 hours, I don't know if I'm going to sleep for the next 36 hours, but Rougiette will help you if you need to get there as well. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about this one. I want to talk some about the offense, the toughness, give out some nightcaps. But on the whole, I'm just sitting here in a little bit of relief, a little bit of shock, a little bit of awe, a little bit like, oh, the season's over, all coming together at once with Houston coming out on top of LSU. It does feel great, though, to beat up on some Tigers, even if they're going to have a bunch of excuses to go with. Look, okay, we got a lot to break out in this one. I do want to get some comments along the way here. I don't quite have the graphics totally finalized. We'll see if I can get those done while we're talking here, but some listener questions from the Everyday All Access chat. So we'll get into that as well. But man, oh man, boom goes the dynamite is right. Brian Lloyd down here at the bottom. I have to say, first and foremost, I would have never thought Houston wins a game like this in the upper 30s against it. Look, I understand that they were not at their fullest of full strength, but man, oh man, it felt like something almost out of a storybook. The fact they could like put together that kind of thing. Conner Weigman has 4 touchdown passes in this one. He also threw 236 yards through the air. He had his own 56 in the ground as well. And really, like, when you think about poetry and all of that with sports, or whatever you think about that with sports, I think it's worth pointing out, like, he basically saw his career at A&M, for all intents and purposes, end at against LSU, and I think that the fact that he got to tie a bow on this season, the special season that it was, is probably as much a good thing for him as anyone else. I feel like in looking at this team, most people would point out that like that was a win that feels really good right now. It does not cover up any of the problems or flaws or anything like that. But I just feel so good about the way. So the offense started off early with Amare Thomas, somewhere in the middle, started leaning on Tanner Koziol, and at the end finished with the run game and Dean Connors. Nice over-the-head catch, over-the-shoulder catch by Stacey Snead as well. I don't mean to leave him out. I don't mean to leave any contributor here. DJ Butler trying to have a couple tough yards. Wasn't his best day or anything like that. But man, like, what an offensive performance. I know, and I want to give guys his privacy, but I know Dean Connors really wanted to go on a high note in this one. Obviously wrapping up his career. He thought he was done a year ago at Rice, got granted the extra year of eligibility, and he chose to come to Houston, stay in the city, play for the city, help Houston get to their 10-win season this year. But also he was particularly close, as most running backs are, with string coach Kurt Hester. And when Coach Hester passed away, the unbreakable part of it, I think he took the loss of that West Virginia game where they wore the blackout jerseys and all that harder than a lot of guys. And so that he came out and had such a big day in this one, I think it's just awesome to see, because he deserved it, frankly. I also think it stands out that Tanner Koziol, who I think we'll talk about a couple times today, he got asked throughout. And look, I assumed back in like early December that he was not going to play in this game. He's a projected high-end draft pick, one of the top tight ends in the NFL draft this spring. And there were all kinds of reasons for him not to play. And he just got to Houston at the end of spring practice last year. His connection with the guys might not have been as visible or the program or whatever. And he said several times in the process, he never even dabbled in the idea of not playing. It was always going to be something he was going to do in this one. And then for him to come out and have that kind of performance. Now, look, receiving the ball, he had 9 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. I don't think, as impressive as that stat line is, that accurately depicts the impact Tanner Koziol had on this football game. He blocking on the edge, he takes the shoulder injury, goes to the medical tent, gets checked out, comes back in, has a couple big-time blocks, and then an important catch to get a first down at the same right after that. All of that happened together for Tanner. And again, he played hurt, got more hurt, got obliterated on that catch after already having been hurt earlier in the game. All of that speaks to a high character kid, obviously. We know Fritz only looks at that. But like, the guy got here in May after the spring game and played through all of this for a program he just joined. And he spoke glowingly about being able to come back to the program and like Tank Dell and those guys come back and work out on campus. He wanted to kind of be a part of the brotherhood in that kind of a way. And I think that speaks volumes to him. And everyone's going to be talking about it, speaks volumes to him. He'll be talking about an NFL draft when they mention on the telecast. It's like some guys will say, like, well, how do you prove you love football? And they show him the tape. Like, hey, I didn't have to play in this one, and I went out here and did this, right? I also think it speaks to the program, though, and what Willie Fritz has built here, where, like, a guy that signed on last May after spring practices were over in 6 months has gotten to where he wants to do that for the program. Look, you can look across the field and see plenty of examples in that game right there, right? But so many college football players looking for themselves, the next bag. And look, sometimes you have to because no one else will. There will be players in Houston's roster that opt out, hit the transfer portal, or do whatever. It just happens in every roster. I don't mean to say Houston's immune to it, but that you can pull in a guy like that and he wants to be that strong a part of what's happening, I think is so big time. We hadn't even talked about the MVP of the game in Conner Weigman. He did get award MVP. I think there's a cowboy hat trophy I saw circulating Twitter that came along with that. Again, 27 to 36 passing. A couple of those incompletions felt on purpose for what it's worth too. Trying to make sure he didn't throw the ball away to the wrong team. 236 yards, 4 touchdowns. And truthfully, I think down the stretch there, they're trying to run the ball. He might have actually had some more had they let him open it up a little bit more. Open up the game, go to targets Amare Thomas. Amare Thomas had 2 early touchdowns. He was thing tied. Houston did something I should stress. I said on the telecast, and I had to double check it, but the stat is correct. LSU had won 119 straight games when they were up by 14 or more points at some point in the football game. LSU went up 14-0 to start this one. It takes a lot of guts and gumption to come back and do that in this game. I thought a big, gigantic play in that happening was Latrell McCutcheon's sack. We didn't talk about the defense at all. Shutout. I mean, 35 points allowed to a team. I get it. Wasn't even their first choice at quarterback. I don't guess. I bet they replaced the guy pretty soon in the transfer portal for Lane Kiffin. But Latrell McCutcheon's sack was so incredibly well dialed up, designed. They had tightened his receiver who was covering down next to the line of scrimmage, kind of in line. So he was already lined up tight to the line of scrimmage. Running backs missed him. Tackle missed him. He comes off the edge, makes a big sack, invigorated the whole Houston Cougars sideline. Next play, you had a great tackle from behind by Rook Brown to force a fumble that Sione Fotu fell on. Houston didn't turn that into points, but suddenly it's like, okay, we can play with these guys. We're not going to have to win scoring 50 points. There will be stops made in this game. I thought as far as the defensive front went, it wasn't just Latrell McCutcheon's sack. Across the board, Houston's defense had a pretty strong showing. Eddie Walls got credit with a sack and a half. I thought he had 2.5 when I was doing my own calculations, but they gave him credit for a sack and a half. Carlos Allen was involved in one of those halves. Khalil Afau, big time play across board. He had a couple hurries and a big sack of his own. Just so many plays made by those guys up front. And it wasn't just the traditional guys. Chance Bryant got in there for a hot second. You saw a handful of linebackers rotate through. Parker got in there for a second on the defensive line as well. It was really, truly a team effort. And I saw a couple guys, I don't know if I dressed sharp or not, but I asked about attendance. They said on the official attendance, and I don't know if that's tickets sold or actual butts and seats, but that came out to be, and make sure you get the number right here because I want to say it wrong. 60, where'd it go? I just saw it. 63,867 for a stadium that seats just over 72,000. So that's pretty strong showing for a bowl game where you'll see a lot of stadiums being very empty to make a TV product on the whole. Now I want to talk about more about this offensive game, more about some standout kind of guys. We'll get to those nightcaps at the end. I also want to get to some questions from our exclusive all access chat and make sure we address those as we need to. Before we get too far, though, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Rugia, because we're talking about the fun stuff. We got to talk about something, too, that most men don't want to bring up. Absolutely should. Stress from work. I don't know why you'd be stressed right now, but if you're stressed right now, it doesn't have to switch off at night. It doesn't usually switch off at night. Even on the worst possible time, Rugia Get Ready can make sure that you are back in control. Rugia Get Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body. So you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. It feels pretty present, confident, ready. After a big-time win, you can feel that all the time with the Rugia Get Ready. If you feel thinking about the next step, now is the time to get discreet packaging, comes right to your door, get online with board-certified doctors, etc. If you've been thinking about it, now is the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege. You get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Parker Ainsworth Locked on Coogs. I want to remind you guys, I want to thank you for making Locked on Coogs your first listen of the day on Sunday after, first listen post-game, or whichever case it may be, somewhere in between. Appreciate all of the listens. And thank you for making Locked on Sports Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already, go out and check out the Everydayer Club. Now, access to ad-free audio episodes, members-only Discord server, special access episodes, one-on-one texting with me during the game. We'll get some questions from that in a second, but all kinds of ways to get extra Locked On Cougs at the everyday all-access membership levels. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to find out more. If you want to just get on the action with the Cougs right away, go to lockedoncougs.supercast.com. And throughout the game, I was texting a little bit with some people, all access members wanted to know some stuff, and I want to talk about some stuff, I should say. And they asked about what the next steps for Conner Weigman were after this game. And I think this could go two ways. One, I think some people wondering, what his next year could look like. He has been vocal at this point about coming back to Houston. I don't think he'll have NFL draft prospects, certainly not high as they would be with another big kind of game next year. And so we have that aspect. He's going to come back to Houston, I believe. The other aspect of this, I think, is what you'll see next year out of him with more weapons on the outside. I think the other thing is you'll see in the transfer portal window that opens up very soon, guys looking at Houston, a handful of pass catchers, maybe some guys from the Houston area looking to come back to Houston, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Those guys have seen now what it looks like to be a part of this offense with Conner Weigman. So if you are that guy that feels like you're not getting enough shine, like Amare Thomas was at UAB last year, you can come to Houston and be that guy. If you want to be the big tight end pass catching threat, if you want to be involved in the action out of the backfield, all those kinds of guys to know that they can come back and play with Conner. I think the offense is going to take a step forward next year. I also have said, I'll be vocal again, I think Houston's schedule is similarly friendly next year. And so that could be a good thing for the program too. And another question here was asking kind of about that, saying like, what's next? And I think a lot of people are excited about 2026 because the 2026 recruiting class, the transfer portal opens up next week, and there'll be more people in it. Unfortunately, probably be a handful of Houston Cougars in it too. That's just the nature of the beast. Um, and I think what you're going to see is a lot of roster turnover and more improvements made to the roster once you have some proof of concept. I don't want to just a lot of questions about what's next though, and the all access members and I can go back and forth in the subtext about that. I don't mean to say I'm never going to answer those questions. I want to sit in though this game that just happened because truthfully, that was a tremendous given that they took roughly a month off between Baylor and this one to come out and sure, the first opening kickoff not great. And then a quick touchdown, 60 yards in 4 plays. The speed of the game, I think, caught Houston's defense a little bit off guard. They were down 14-0, less than 5 minutes in the football game. That ain't great, right? I thought it was impressive to see at various points in this game, Houston make adjustments and Houston learn and continue to take steps forward in the course of the game. Like, it is little things, and I don't mean to say I want to preach to make a penalty every time or whatever, but when you look at things like after being targeted a couple times, Will James on the short side corner, who's also not very tall himself, once they started trying to beat him over the top, he just committed pass interference once it was more than 15 yards downfield and looked like it was going to be a catch. And he said, okay, 15 yards is better than getting beat over the top. Like, we're not getting beat over the top anymore. And look, there are better ways to play that if you can keep up and all those kinds of things. But ultimately, that was an adjustment made after being beat a couple times. Same thing with the kicking off. And at one point, LSU actually dorked up the kickoff and didn't let it go out of bounds. But making those kinds of adjustments, because there were things that you could keep up with them on, right? Like, Houston stopped the run by and large in this game very well after the first 3 series. LSU had just 77 yards rushing, and Harlan Berry finished the season, or the second half of the season, as their starting running back, and he had 3 carries for 45 yards, right? Like, Houston had their way for the most part with him, and frankly, he had those, that one really long one, and then he just kind of didn't get the ball after that. They were making sure all these option-y kind of things. He only had the 3 carries. They were making sure he didn't get the ball. Jawan Johnson had 3 carries for 4 yards. Xavier Thomas had the sweep play at the end for a touchdown. His other carry was a negative yard carry. Michael Van Buren, we talked about being a dual threat quarterback. He had 11 carries for 24 yards. Now, as far as building these kinds of things up and how do you translate that into next year? I guess my thought would be like, okay, you've understood that you can make adjustments on the fly a little bit better than this game than I think you did in games previously. Hopefully you continue to have stronger athletes along the way. I thought Houston's defensive line played really well tonight, and I think those guys deserve their flowers. And as far as talking about sequences of the game here, I mentioned that big stop that Latrell McCutcheon was on, even though it didn't quite result in touchdowns. I should point out Houston's 3 touchdown drives in the first half were 75 yards, 73 yards, and 90 yards, and none of them were the typical long 9-minute Houston drive. They're pretty impressive in that instance. But I thought that the Koziol aspect of the second half, right, where he is involved in the blocking, involved in the pass catching, you saw him, in the first half making the big touchdown grab, and it seemed like, okay, he's coming alive in a lot of ways. And while Koziol's off to the pros, I guess it needs to be formally announced, but he'll be off to the pros. I do think that Houston had an element of riding the hot hand in this one offensively, whether it was Amare Thomas early, Koziol in the middle, Dean Connors late. Again, Dean Connors had 126 yards on the ground. And I should stress, the defensive middle, the defensive tackles where they're at, they're starting all season defensive tackles, day one defensive tackles at LSU. And Houston did fine running it up the middle against those guys by and large. I feel like that was good stuff at him, and finding ways to ride the hot hand, as I was trying to say, were really, really honestly, I think things you want to see more out of this offense. Now, we know I don't need to list the laundry list of the Keyshawn's and the Parises and all the guys coming in to the program next year. But ultimately, I feel like riding the hot hand will hopefully also bring in playmakers from other, transfer portal guys, right? And I think that that's going to be a fun aspect of what happens in the next 10 days of this football program. I want to hand out some nightcaps and give out some game ball kind of feeling moments to guys from the game tonight. If you can throw any nightcaps you got in the chat, we'll try and get some of those out as well. Before we get to all that, though, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because Fridays can feel different during basketball season. FanDuel is making them even better because on Friday nights before the games tip off, FanDuel is giving you a new way to kick off the weekend with the NBA's Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become an appointment viewing in the NBA Happy Hour. Opening FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, different boosts, bonus, and surprises. Timing is perfect. It's right before games, right before the weekend starts. You can add extra energy to that Friday night basketball without having to overthink it. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app, see what's dropping during the NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only at FanDuel, the sportsbook partner of the NBA. Another reminder to the folks to thank you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day, the next day, first listen after the game, or wherever it is in between, and making Locked On Sports Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. And if you haven't already, join the Everyday or All Access Club for even more Locked On Cougs content. We'll do some video breakdowns on plays and stuff over on that side of things. We've done a couple of basketball games. This program got launched after the Baylor game, so actually not a whole lot on that front. Yeah, we'll get some good football from this up there as well soon. If you make Locked On Cougs a bigger part of your everyday, head to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer or lockedoncougs.supercast.com to sign up to get even more things. Discord servers for all the members, various ways to text me throughout the week and games, all kinds of ways to get in on the action at lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Now, nightcaps in this one are fun. Get a tip the cap, get a little nightcap to whomever. This is a 75th. Y'all know it was Whataburger's 75th anniversary. Did not know that, but we got a cup for it. There you go. One Supercast or one All Access member said they were going to have a nightcap to Tanner Koziol. I think that one feels fairly obvious, but shout out to the Everyday Club for that one. Tanner Koziol had led the team in receptions with 9 catches, 76 yards, the big touchdown right before half, big-time blocks, and I think that big-time toughness we talked about a lot throughout this one stands to be probably the most significant impact he made, even. It's not a statistical one at that. Amare gets a nightcap for his 2 touchdowns early, no doubt about it. Kind of tied the game up, almost seemed like on his own. He was not going to go away quietly in that one. I want to talk about one play that deserves a nightcap that really kind of comes down to a couple of people, but right before halftime. It's about 1:35 left. LSU is marching. They're approaching field goal range. It's 3rd down, and Carlos Allen and Khalil Laufau have a nice little cross stunt. Carlos Allen eats up a lot of blocks. Laufau props through and gets a easy sack, and it's a big sack that takes LSU out of field goal range with about 1.5 minutes. Now, Laufau had a great night, great pass rushing, and a couple other big plays in the backfield, great tackles for loss. Laufau was tremendous in this game. But that sack itself took LSU out of field goal range at about 1.5 minutes. They had to punt the ball. Houston was able to drive the ball down. LSU penalties helped and find Tanner Koziol in the end zone right before halftime struck to take a lead. And that doesn't happen if LSU's kicking a field goal. And frankly, if LSU kicks a field goal and then kicks the ball off, Houston's probably dramatically changing their entire strategy. Houston did have to go 90 yards. I don't mean like the offense had no role in that. That did feel pretty impressive. I mentioned Dean Connerson is running the game. I thought he got better as the game went on. That's that unbreakable toughness that that people talk about with the whole program, but I think that he really wants to be known for as well. I want to give one other nightcap on his final touchdown run. Typically, the split zone blocker has been Tanner Koziol. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and he's a pass catching threat. So you have to treat him motioning across like he's going to go out and catch the football. As soon as he went out injured, they were trying to find different guys do his role at different times. And I think that what's interesting about the way they did it in this instance on Dean Conner's final touchdown was they put one of my favorite people on the team and Mekhi Muse in that spot. Mekhi is a fantastic person, a super tough person, but honestly, he's just not a very big person. And he comes across after motioning from the outside receiver into the line of scrimmage on a split zone action to lead to kick out block that ultimately springs Dean Conner to the second level. And Dean Conner makes a couple guys miss and gets a touchdown there at the end. I'm so happy Mekhi Muse was in on that play, because if you'd have told me, there's no doubt in my mind he was going to make that block, but he has just, because of depth chart issues, because Houston's got a 10-win talented roster in the Big 12, right? He had trouble getting on the field in ways that weren't special teams. Then Mekhi got to be in and involved in making that play. I thought was a big deal. And I feel like that was a big step for him. Now, I see a bunch of things here in the chat about nightcap Dean Conner. Second that. Wonder what next year looks like. There's talk about this idea of investing a lot into fan experience for next year. I do know that, look, whatever you think about the program and the department, I think that Nunez is very receptive to feedback. And I think they took a lot of feedback this year. And frankly, I think before this year, a lot of the feedback was like, yeah, but if we're winning, like, things will get fixed. And I think to Y45H text point here, that clearly they showed that, okay, there are a dedicated group of fans that show up, win, lose, or draw. A handful more people showed up this year with wins. And now it's like, okay, what else can we be doing? And I think that is, whether it's up here, no excuse for better support next year. I think that some really strong showing from the team this year, and some, it put a light on room for improvement there. So I appreciate that out of the commentary. Other nightcaps, mentioned the defensive front line. I'm trying to make sure I don't scroll through here and miss any either. Man. Late transfers to Connors and Koziol, MVP of the year, Big 12 Coach of the Year. I guess technically you typically see that given the guy that wins the most games, but like games against expectation, it's hard to look at anyone past Fritz. I feel like, oh man, just a lot. So other angles taking this game. I thought Kobe Young got a lot more involved in this one. He only had credit with a couple catches, but he also forced a couple pass interferences, which were, I think, designed to go towards him, right? Good to see Kobe get involved. He hadn't watched his high school highlight tape. I want to point out that Kobe Young's high school highlight tape in New Orleans, I'm sure he really wanted to beat LSU, being a New Orleans guy. Kobe Young is one of the more sought after prospects show up as of late from Houston. He's just been he got injured last year, and it's been kind of down the depth chart this year. Don't get it twisted. Kobe Young can really run some routes and really gets open with a lot of speed. Good to see him get involved in this one. Ken's going to point out and give out a fans nightcap, and that's probably like a strong way to end it, because honestly, over 63,000 people there, a lot of red. And look, we'll see what the Alamo Bowl looks like, but storylines since you beat Arizona State, came home to a fairly empty stadium against West Virginia at 11 a.m. the day after Halloween. Storylines against, I guess technically Baylor was a road game, but storylines against Tech, and they said that that was mostly their fans or whatever. And then the Alamo Bowl said they don't want you because they don't want your fan support. And the numbers came out about Houston having 80% capacity, and that was the lowest in the Big 12. Several schools were over 100%, meaning they had standing room only every game or whatever, right? And to show up, like Kenneth's pointing out here, in a large-scale way, yes, it's the holidays. Yes, they made a big multi-week deal to get tickets out. Yes, it was also LSU. Let's not beat around the bush on that one and all that, right? I would hope that between the 10-win season this year, between the efforts being made by the backside of things, but the work in the recruiting class and the high in the class 2026, the moves are getting made in the next 10 days on transfer portal additions, and there will be some. And if hearing about some stuff that could be worth signing up to be on board with, because some impressive athletes coming back home. All of that's to say that you could see how things will translate to a more successful year next year. Look, we said this back when Houston got into the Big 12, and we said this back. This show started in the last year of the American, and it was always going to take some time, and it took a coaching change, and it took a couple years. But Houston had a 30-year window to make up for, roughly, right? You get out of the Southwest Conference when it falls apart in 95. It's 2025. You find a football game. You win 10 games in the Big 12 after finally getting back to it. And I know that a lot happened over that 30 years. Case Keenum was a great deal. Peach Bowl was a great deal. At Oliver and all ups and downs, Dan Ogres, and all of it happened, right? A lot of downs, fine. It just feels like this has staying power now, because for several of those highs, whether it was Bryles or Sumlin or Herman, I was like, okay, but they're all out the door soon. And now that you are the Big 12, it doesn't feel like anyone's out the door soon. Now, other Big 12 programs have lost their coaches to, Big 10 programs in the last 10 days, 2 weeks. I don't mean to say it can't happen. It just doesn't feel like it's about to happen. And it also feels like you're on the right track with it all moving in the right direction. Why would anyone not want to be a part of what's happening? It's an impressive deal. And look, we got more to talk about this week. I'll probably get another episode out on this one, but more in-depth detailed, less reactionary, more thought through. This is too much fun to talk about right afterwards. Monday, basketball team has games to preview. Chaos happening in college basketball too, with like pros coming back to play in college, all kinds of stuff there. And like to have a 10-win 10 wins as a member of the Big 12 is just so. If I had told someone in 2019 that by 2025 they'd be a 10-win Big 12 program, how about this? Go back and tell, like I was a young lad. Go back to 1995 when the Southwest Conference is falling apart, and tell someone, okay, but in 30 years, we're going to be a 10-win Big 12 team. We lived it, we saw it, it was progressive, and it felt natural as it happened this year. But I don't want to just move too quickly past. Houston wins 10 games in the Big 12. And it happened faster, I think, than people realized. Maybe not faster than you and I realized, but faster than other people realized what happened. And that's worth celebrating. And so I hope you enjoy celebrating it. Like I said, it's the holiday season with New Year's and all that. So be prepared for some odd weeks before we get back to like the 3rd, 4th, 5th. We'll kind of get back into more of our typical rhythm, breaking down things here each and every day at Locked on Coogs. So subscribe and hit the bell so you know when things go live. Locked on Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs. 10 wins. Go Coogs.